two, three. Take me out to the ball game. Take me out to the crowd. Buy me some peanuts and Cracker Jack. I don't care if I ever get back. Oh, it's root for the Cubbies. If they don't win, it's a shame. For it's 1, 2, 3 strikes, you're out at the old ball game.
This is from WBRN Radio and on the Boston Red Network, the Monday morning quarterback for the 16th of July 2018. Congratulations to France for winning the World Cup. That'll be their second World Cup victory in the last 20 years. We'll do a special program on that here at WBRN on All About Sports, and also we'll probably put it on BR on the World. Those are two of our productions or shows that we regularly feature here. And we'll have more exclusive details for the commentary, and this is soccer or football. We have to rely upon the experts at French 21, a very good station. We invite you to listen to them. They have their production in French, Arabic, and in English. So no matter what basic language group that you speak, you can go there and get information. An unfortunate thing happened to us as we were recording. We had a technical failure, and part of a very good analysis disappeared, sort of a downer, as we said back in our day. But nonetheless, we still capture it from the World Cup with some commentary. One thing to remember about soccer / football, it is a little different that kids growing up, particularly in various emerging nations in Africa, aspire to be football players. And that's the same thing in France. They come out of Mbibi. They come out of the what they call the suburban locations. It's sort of the reverse from what happens here in the U.S. We usually think of people of color living in urban areas and using the word, say, urban music, urban whatever. It used to be, well, the yuppies had moved in there, so they've gentrified urban areas, so we have to change that around. But in France, when they speak of suburban areas outside of Paris, outside of Marseille or whatever, they are talking about areas where people of color live. In fact, DJ Trump made the comment that people from Africa and from the Mideast were destroying Europe. Well, I'm not sure where he is. I'm not certain what he understands about the European situation. Nations like Germany rely upon immigration literally to, as they say, power the factories. In fact, there was an article we looked at what immigrants were doing for the pension system in Germany, bringing in more money over the long haul. Germany, like many of the European nations, has an aging population. Now, you have to understand, this is a little different situation than just taking in people on humanitarian cases. This is a situation where they're literally, it's a business case bringing in laborers. Now, the UK is different. The UK has a Commonwealth of Nations, and people from the Commonwealth, whether they be from places as diverse as the Bahamas, any of the Caribbean islands there, various other countries across the African continent that were occupied by the British. they can get papers to come to London, etc. And now also under the European Union setup, people were free to travel in the Union, and that's within the European Union. That brought in people from the old Soviet Union, Poland, etc. And that was one of the reasons for Brexit, more so than anything else, because they were more integrated into the job pools. And say, for instance, someone from Kenya or elsewhere. Now, as far as people say from India, the backbone of the National Healthcare Service. So when you look at these various countries, and a gentleman, a professor, pointed out to me that prior to 1992, he's from Togo, and he said that the Togolese could enter Germany without a passport. Didn't know that, but they were involved in some of those countries. Germany, not very many, but the colonial ties, and of course there have been Africans in Germany since the 1800s, way before Schickengruber ever polished off Mein Kampf. So this is not a new development here. It's an ongoing development. And when we look at diversity, and when you hear our presentation, various commentators there on French 21 are talking about diversity. France is a diversified country, no doubt about it. And on the French national team, I believe there were a count of people from about 16 different countries. Now, many of these people that have French citizenship do not play in France. That's to be understood. So the world has changed, and this is part of a problem you have when we look back at America, make America great again. If you're talking about to the apartheid days of the 50s and early 60s, it's simply not going to happen. And DJ Trump is finding that out because of the globalized economy and how it's integrated with his tariff program, assuming that he can have a very hardline position for negotiating and someone will try wolf. That has not happened to date. The Chinese economy, incidentally, grew at 6.7. I don't have my cheat sheet here, but it dropped from 6.8 to 6.7. That is still good for China. For China in this whole tariff regime, they just need to, as they say, keep the forts going. Obviously, they will lose some quote-unquote business there. It will affect them probably up to 0.5% of GDP, perhaps a little bit more. But you have to be willing to lose on the front side, as Jesse Jackson, the preacher from Chicago, would say, to win on the backside. And that is what this is all about. Now, granted, the sanctions that DJ Trump has placed on China and the retaliatory sanctions just hurt parts of the economy, primarily where his supporters preside. The U.S. is it was a 16, now it's $19 trillion economy. So it's not going to have that much. You talk about farm exports, smaller manufacturers that buy prefabricated steel, whether it be not so much from China. Most of that comes from Germany and from Canada and several other countries there. So in other words, you have the tariffs going back and forth. But the problem is with the U.S. economy, the way it is set up presently, is it's still the Obama economy. Don't be fooled by that. That when you put certain wrinkles in, you get consequences. Now, I'm not talking about unintended consequences. Even the poorly prepared economists at the Trump administration knew that this was coming. They just assumed people would buckle on. It didn't happen in the real world. They've been watching too much Disney live or whatever. So thus you have that situation out there. And Trump made a statement that on the economic sphere, the foe was the EU. Well, perhaps so. But the EU together can take care of themselves. That is not a question there. As to what will happen next week in England, the UK, we don't know. May is on the fire there. She has a plan to exit Brexit. Many of the people in her Tory party, the Conservative Party, do not back that. Most of them have resigned, including Boris Johnson, etc. And they would have a no-confidence vote, but they know that if they do have a no-confidence vote, the leader of the Labour Party would become the Prime Minister. Period. So that is the situation that they face. And now this is more than one. Do not think automatically that any May plan or May Day plan or whatever as it's called could be called will come up. Mr. Corbyn is waiting, Jeremy Corbyn, out there to take over the government with his Labour Party. But the problem is the European Union has to agree, and they do not have to agree to the terms there, so then they would have what they call a hard Brexit, which would not help the UK. Now, whatever trade deals DJ Trump strikes with the UK or doesn't strike with the UK, it's so what to that arrangement. The Americans cannot make up enough of the export traffic out of the UK that is into the EU now. So in other words, that is a very big problem. And what happens with the American economy is more or less, it will start to determine it, and healthcare, these very big issues, will go to Mr. Charlie Cook, the premier handicapper, to look at the some overall races that have changed from lean or whatever Republican to sheer toss-up. These are House races. And we'll look at Judge Kavanaugh from a realistic standpoint, and we can say that the Kavanaugh, if all the Republicans stay together, there's no indication they will not. You have Colin, more or less a reliable vote for the Republicans, and you have also McCoskey out of Alaska. She's Lisa McCoskey. She's a reliable vote also. And the other two, so in other words, the Republicans basically will stay together, and there are some Democrats that will be forced to vote with the Republicans. Now, will this help them? We don't know. Donnelly in Indiana, he is could be in trouble in that very red state, and voting with the president more than likely will not help him. He has to deal with the Democratic base. Claire McCastle's another case there. When you start seeing the votes shape up from a practical political point of view, if the Republicans have the necessary 51 votes, it doesn't matter what the Democrats do, with the exception of, say, Claire McCastle, Emily's List, and some of those organizations would not send money to her campaign. That's just a simple fact there. Joe Manchin, he's 71. I didn't know he was 71, but it doesn't matter one way or the other how he votes. Period. If they have the majority vote, it seems they will have that. So let's go to Uncle Carl Robe now, and because we missed Uncle Carl and his machinations on the week that was. Incidentally, we have Numbers Man here on the Boston Red Network, the Numbers Man part of This Week in Economics. We invite you to tune in to it as one of many, many things we have been doing around here. Let me see if I can find Uncle Carl while I hunt for him. And we do also have an announcement from Michael Moore and his Traverse City Festival. We'll get to that later here. Uncle Carl's writing in the Wall Street Journal as usual. And this does tie in with what Charlie Cook is talking about also. Whom do the red state Democrats fear the most? It didn't take long for the political blowtorches to start flames after DJ Trump announced the nominee to the Supreme Court. The president entered the East Room. The selection of the justices as the most profound responsibility of the president. He announced that he would nominate Judge Kavanaugh, the District Court of Appeals. There's a question there if there was a quid pro quo worked out with Anthony Kennedy to announce a judge to designate, I should say, Judge Kavanaugh. Has expressed his thanks for the honor. That's Kavanaugh did there. 5 minutes later, Elizabeth Warren hit my mailbox, declaring that she can count as a no vote. I'm just wondering if I did this. Anyway, if it didn't, and sent her $3. Well, this was soon followed by email from the 2020 Democratic presidential wannabe, Kamala Harris. She warned that the mild-mannered Kavanaugh represents a fundamental threat to the promise of justice and equality, no doubt. In MoveOn.org, Tom Snyder, etc., fill in the blanks, Quality repeated the same scary labels for Kavanaugh. Right-wing, extremely right-wing, no doubt about that. He has a history. The days of bipartisan, judicial nominees seem like ancient history. In 1993, all but three, supported Bill Clinton's nominee, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and a year later, 3/4 of the Republicans backed the second pick, Stephen Breyer, who didn't disappoint. During the G.W. Bush administration, Harry Reid worked to perfect poisonous tactics for obstructing judicial nominees. In 2005, only half the Democratic Senate vote to confirm John Roberts. By 2006, only 4 Democrats supported Samuel Alito. Today, the Republican advantage in the Senate is razor-free. 51 to 49 if John McCain is well enough to vote. This focuses attention on Democratic senators. That has changed somewhat. Heidi Heitkamp of North Dakota, can't count her in. And this Joe Donnelly, the old sheriff down in Indiana. Other red state Democrats apparently fear their party's resistance wing more than they do the Trump. Even before that, Claire McCaskill said that she was not optimistic the president would nominate somebody that I'd feel comfortable with. Bill Nelson, he's down in Florida, said last week he expected to vote against the Trump nominee as he did with Judge Gorsuch. And it's a conventionalism that the battle over the Supreme Court nominee energizes both parties. The Democrats have already have an enthusiasm edge this year. Protracted fight over Judge Kavanaugh could end up narrowing the gap by firing up Republican voters, in his opinion. Let's go to Mr. I have a quick report, actually. This is Jennifer Duffy here. When Anthony Kennedy announced on June 27 that he retired from the bench, he set off another round of one of Washington's favorite parlor games involving the U.S. Senate. Confirm or not, the game began with a rapid speculation of who would be the nominee, in which senators would vote for and against as yet to be announced nominee. And Judge Brett Kavanaugh, 12 days later, the game progressed to the next level. And a typo here. They spelled his name with a C and not with a K. It is a K. On its face, this appears to be a very sophisticated game. It requires a heavy dose of strategic thinking to navigate through the votes for and against the nominee. Will it destroy? Will it boost his chances for re-election? Who will be the deciding voters? Which senators will abandon their party? And what about the minority party? Will obstruct the nominee? Satisfy their base, or simply infuriate the majority party's voters? In fact, the game will confirm or not for SCOTUS nominee is more like a few rounds of Connect 4. Although it at times looks more like Hungry Hippo than Grandmaster Chess Tournament. This is not to diminish the importance of the confirmation process of the path an individual senator takes on their path to their decision. However, it is a reminder that the game isn't nearly as sophisticated or unpredictable as the media and Senate watchers would like. There are two ways of looking at the process of confirming a Supreme Court nominee: through the eyes of each party or through the eyes of individual senators. When it comes to Kavanaugh, we finally got his name spelled right. Confirmation, Republicans' task is pretty straightforward. They need to guide the nominee through individual meetings with senators. That's just pro forma. And through other hearings, and keep the members of its caucus on board. The Democrats' task is inherently trickier. The minority leader Schumer is not going to be able to keep all 49 Democrats in the fold. Second, he needs to decide how much of a fight to put up, knowing that the party's odds of defeating Kavanaugh's confirmation are extremely, almost non-existent. Or ultimately almost non-existent. Sorry about that. Anyway, that doesn't mean that Schumer doesn't have to concede the desires of several constituencies. First and loudest, a constituency is an interest group that runs the gamut of issues from abortion to LGBTQ rights, labor, the environment, and their views. And a lot of this, incidentally, has changed. The resistance movement is now more united under one banner and not single out these smaller issues where people were all divided up like little pieces on a checkerboard. Or maybe a chessboard. We'll stick with checkers. Schumer should shut down the Senate until after midterm elections in November in hopes that the Democrats would win the majority. That is one view. They are joined in this sentiment to some degree by some of the more progressive Democratic senators, but it's a strategy that carries a great risk of infuriating the Republican base, which thus far has not been nearly as enthusiastic about the election as Democrats. Given the risk and rewards ratio, how far does Schumer want to go to satisfy the two groups? Then there's a group of Democratic senators, largely comprised of senators up for re-election, who sit in red states and purple states, who view Kavanaugh's confirmation as a weeks-long root canal. Not a good choice of words. For most of them, this is a terrible no-win vote, regardless of which side they take. In truth, they want it to be over. As such, they want Schumer to let the confirmation proceed quietly and expediently. In the end, it's safe to say that none of these constituencies is going to get what they want. One consolation is the Democratic senators are getting is that the confirmation process is a boost for their fundraising. Well, if there weren't so many people sending fundraising emails at once. Democrats are stepping up fundraising requests in the days following Kavanaugh's announcement. Interest groups focused on the need to defeat him. I just wonder how many people fall in that trap. Putting party strategies aside, the other lens through which to watch the SCOTUS confirmation process is through individual senators. Both Schumer and McConnell would like to keep their respective members in fold. The confirmation vote is not conclusive to ask any member to take on for the team. Conducive. Not surprising, both parties have a number of members who have the potential to stray from the party to support or oppose. Not in the Republican Party. There are 4 Republican senators. Colin, we talked about that. Jeff Flake. I'm not sure. Flake's probably a Flake. Lisa Murkowski of Alaska. And Paul Ryan, he's just making noise, all accounts. The Collins and Murkowski seem inclined to support Kavanaugh, much to the chagrin of Democrats. In his official statement, Flake appears to be focused on one criteria. I have said before, approving a nominee who will interpret the Constitution rather than legislate from the bench should be a top priority. That's flummery. There aren't any indicators that Kavanaugh would clear the hurdle. Paul issued a statement, a neutral statement. This is basically Paul Ryan and Paul. The Ryan Paul, basically the same. Paul Watcher said that he is concerned about Kavanaugh's view on the Fourth Amendment and constitutional right to privacy. Well, he's a libertarian. GOP strategists say they are confident that Kavanaugh can put Paul's concerns to rest. He lies. The bottom line, very likely to hold its members, said John McCain, who is absent due to illness. Oh, save John McCain. How about that? And let's see what else here. This is disappointing for Democrats, in that Republican defections are really only chance they have to block Kavanaugh's. Somebody here continues to misspell his name. Oh, well. It would make it more difficult for Schumer to keep his members united. Also more difficult there. Kavanaugh is focused on Democrats who will be on the ballot, particularly 10 running in states that Trump carried. Some of those including Pennsylvania. Bob Casey, his father, of course, is there. Trump +1 indicates he wouldn't support any nominee. Tammy Baldwin, out of Wisconsin, the same difference there. Her base, she's dependent upon. She's opposed to him. She's not going to go back there. And the remaining 8 who have made their decisions, who have not made their decisions public. Brown, Claire McCaskill. These are people that voted against Neil Gorsuch, a good vote. Bill Nelson of Florida, Debbie Strzavino, she doesn't need that. John Tester of Montana, 20+ out in Montana, he voted against him. Senators Donnelly of Indiana, 19+, Heidi Heitkamp, 36+ in North Dakota. Joe Meacham, 42+, all voted in favor of Judge Gosham. For the record, Fluke, Collins, and Paul all supported Judge Gosham also. Endorsements from Democrats groups like Emily's List, NARAD, Pro-Choice America, is another indication of some of these Democrats will vote. Both groups oppose Kavanaugh. Obviously, they would. Any senator who votes for Kavanaugh would certainly lose support of Emily's List. Tammy Baldwin's not interested in that. Claire McCaskill is in a different situation there. So, voting against Kavanaugh maybe only be a marginal impact on Baldwin, Brown, Casey, Stabenow, and Tester. Of the 7 Democrats who voted against Gorsuch, Kavanaugh's confirmation vote holds the most risk for Claire McCaskill. And this is where the practical judgment is made that if the Republicans stay together and they see the 51 votes coming from them, Claire McCaskill doesn't have to worry about it. And she is MC, as far as her name is concerned. She risks losing Emily's List. She needs as much money as she can get. She had always said she would vote for Missouri's interest, not her party's interest. Well, yeah, she'll have a chance to do that. Joe Meacham, I see Heidi Heitkamp, Donnelly, and Joe Meacham all voting for Kavanaugh. There's nothing they would lose on this. Donnelly would be the biggest loser here because his Democratic base in Indiana is mad as hell. Heidi Heitkamp, well, she's in North Dakota. The Democrats there just have to try to get enough independent votes, and who knows. At least 8 Democrats, a few Republicans will be bombarded. That with TV commercials, not going to make a lot of difference. You waste your money in Indiana. You'd waste your money in North Dakota. So save your money. Fight another game. Many Democrats think it's unfair that Kavanaugh will even get a vote before the election. It is unfair, but Schumer, quite frankly, doesn't have the wherewithal not to do it. Let's look at a couple of more things here. This is by David Wasserman. This is Maine 2, Poliquin, I suppose how you pronounce his name, moved from lean Republican to a toss-up in that race. He's Bruce Poliquin has proved elusive for Democrat targets in 2014-2016. Democrats taunted promising poll numbers and swore they could turn it on. Republicans evidently wealth and a Wall Street man. Both times Republicans effectively cast Orono State Senator Emily Kane as an Ivy League elitist, who grew up outside the state, and Peliquis prevailed in the mostly rural working class district. In 2008, they had Jared Golden presents a much tougher contrast for the 64-year-old Poliquin. Unlike Kane, Golden grew up squarely in the second district in the dairy farm in Leeds. He enlisted Marines after 9/11, served several tours of duty, blowing down doors in Afghanistan, as well as working for Susan Collins on the Homeland Security Committee and personal office. Golden won the Democratic nomination of 49-42 against a wealthy environmentalist Lucas Sinclair, whose liberalism and residency in Portland likely would have doomed him. And Golden's famous Marines who run into fire against an incumbent who ducks into ballrooms. So that's a good slogan out there. Democrat heritage has been strong in that district. 94% of the district is European. 22% of the adults hold college degrees. Interesting there. For over a decade, re-elected pro-life Democrat Michael McCall. And he voted for Barack Obama in 2014 by 2012 by 9 points. But it also with this Paul LePage in 2014 and in 2016, it gave DJ Trump the lone electoral vote 51-41 there. And that's really not. So Golden has a base in heavy Lewiston and is a type of Democrat who takes advantage of a favorable national environment. In other words, he will be the Marine version of Connor Lamb, but pro-choice, but pro-terror. He's pro-choice, but pro-terror. Pledges he wouldn't support Nancy Pelosi. That's no big deal. He wouldn't be afraid to speak his what he believes. Money is a hurdle. This millionaire here, Poliquin, is expected to file with over $2.5 million on hand at the end of June, while Golden had $1 million, but is expected to file with just $400,000 cash on hand after a competitive primary. Another wild card here is Maine will be using ranked choice. We at this mic, along with Jesse Jackson, have always looked at ranked choice as a racist maneuver. Period. The general election for the first time, which had helped Golden in 2014, Peliquis won 47%, while the independent took 11%. I don't know if the independent this year. There are two left-leaning independents in the second congressional district, but if their votes select Golden as a second choice vote, Golden would an instant runoff if no one broke a 50% tie. This Peliquis character won't be easily beaten. The district has now seen incumbent in 102 years. Even Democrats admit Peliquis' strategy. Bert Littlefield has masterfully crafted his image and campaign for the past 4 years. Moreover, Trump is fairly popular here, but Golden may be one Democrat top candidate in the country. The race moves from lean to toss. And now we go to Michigan. 8 Bishop from lean Republican to a toss-up. Very interesting what they're doing. Detroit suburbs, 2-term Republican Mike Bishop didn't have a well-funded opponent in 14 and 16, but that's changing this year. He has Elsa Stockin, who grew up in a well-known meatpacking family in rural Holly and served free tours as an Arabic proficient CIA analyst and has raised over $2 million. Ended March with more money than Bishop. The 8 combines Republican-leaning Oakland County with the liberal state capital in Lansing. It voted for President Trump 51 to 44, while Bishop took 58% against a young prosecutor who got a late start. But in 18, Democrats will finally have the resources to legate Bishop's record in multiple private surveys depict Bishop in weak shape. Slockin, let me get that right. When contrast her record in sensitive areas of the work with Bishop's lengthy political career prior to this election, Bishop served as a majority leader of the state senate, made several enemies from trying to block construction of a bridge to Canada. Oh boy. We'll go after Bishop's vote in favor of GOP health care and tax bills. Now, this is very, very serious here. Slockin, most vulnerability is a carpetbag elite label. She moved back to Michigan in 2017 from D.C. after wrapping up her post as acting Assistant Secretary of Defense and has been a registered voter in Michigan since she left for college at Cornell. Oh, well. She's still born there and raised there. Means she's likely to get defined in terms of debate as much as Bishop. So that's kind of interesting within itself there, where she stands. In our wrap-up here, we're running a little bit late. We'll explore from ABC. Donna Brazil will be there to talk about the indictment of these various Russian officials in the election tampering case. Now, the interesting situation about that is, on the eve later today, DJ Trump will meet with V.I. Putin in Helsinki, Finland, for the summit. But the whole situation is that the grand jury did indict these individuals, but there is no extradition treaty with the Russian Federation. Therefore, they are not appearing. There will be no trial, and not of them, or they will be trying them in absentia. Other people, but they so far haven't found any Americans to, as they say, pin the label on, according to the indictments. So this is a weak case. It's all about virtually nothing. They're not going to be taking the case to a real jury because they have no one to take. So this is what we got out of the whole position there. We have some information also from Face the Nation. They have John Cornyn there. He is a Texas senator, is a vote counter, and he claims he counts 51 votes. So in other words, the nomination is a done deal there. Now let me go and do the sports. The only thing we have left is our baseball scores. The World Cup, it was 4-2 France over Croatia. Everybody knows about that in the world now. And they have here why Mbappe is soccer's future king. I don't know about all that. Mr. Ronaldo, they compare him to, I don't know, not trying to compare him to Pele yet, hopefully. Anyway, the former goalie died at 35 while swimming. Well, anyway, we'll have on BR on the World and our sports program. We'll have the wrap-up of the World Cup, so I invite you to listen to it on bostonred.net. Incidentally, you can find us on the iHeart mobile app, and also on Stitcher mobile app, on TuneIn's mobile app, on various others, Android, hopefully we're there, the Google franchise, the Apple franchise. We are there, but I'm not sure what appears there. We're also on YouTube. Don't want to leave YouTube out. Appreciative of the people on YouTube that get our audio version there. On to the Rangers and Orioles. Incidentally, we're going, the All-Star game is tomorrow night in Washington, D.C. And then we'll be off on baseball for 3 days and resume, I believe, on Thursday. Nonetheless, the Rangers were in Camden Yards, 6-5 was the score. The Blue Jays were in Fenway Park. And let's see, Red Sox at 6-2. The Yankees were in Cleveland 6-2. The Nationals were in New York, Nationals 6-1. The Phillies were in Florida, Marlins 10-5. Everyone is tired this time of year. They need the break. The D-backs were in Atlanta 5-1. And in 10. The Brewers were in Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh pulled that out as 7-6. The line score there. The Brewers had 9 hits, 2 errors, and the Pirates had 9 hits and 1 error. The Royals of Kansas City were on the south side of Chicago. The White Sox at 10-1. And in 10, the Rays were in the Twin Cities. The Twins ended up 11-7. And the Tigers and Astros in Houston. The Tigers finally won a game, 6-3. The Astros have lost a few games last few days. Doesn't mean very much at the All-Star break. It would mean something if we were going down at the end of the regular season. The Reds and the Cardinals in St. Louis Cardinals 6-4. And the Mariners and Rockies out in Mile High City. Rockies are 4-3. The Angels and Dodgers. The Dodgers came up 5-3 in that game. The Athletics and Giants were across the bay. Athletics have been winning some. 6-2. And the Cubbies and Padres down in San Diego, 7-4. Cubbies. Mr. John Lester was a winner. Mr. Morrow got the save there. And let me see if I can get the standing here. Hopefully at the All-Star break, one place we should have the standing. We hope. For some reason, the standing has been a bit elusive. Not sure why. This incidentally is from ESPN. We should. Here we go. In the American League East, the Red Sox are on top. And the Yankees are 4.5 games back. In the American League Central, Cleveland is on top. And the Twins are 7.5 games back. The Tigers, are 12.5 games back, and then you can forget it. In the West, the Astros are on top, and the Mariners are 5 games back, and still a good contest. The Oakland Athletics are 8 games back, and the Angels are 14 games back, and then you can forget it there. In the National League East, the Phillies are on top. Atlanta is a half game back, and the Nationals are 5.5 games back. This could be an interesting race. In the Central, the Cubbies are still on top, but we never say that. And the Brewers are 2.5 games back. The Cardinals are 7.5 games back. And the Pirates are 9 games back. This is going to be an interesting race in the Central. That's the National League Central. The Dodgers are finally on top. The Arizona Diamondbacks are a half game back. The Rockies are 2 games back. Everybody's clustered up together basically here. And the Giants of San Francisco are 4 games back. The Padres can forget it for now. They are 14.5 back. That is the standings at All-Star break. Have the batting championship. I don't know who will win the batting championship. Be interesting there. But we'll find out about it. And we'll have a special on the... We usually always have a special on the All-Star game, and we'll get one up there on Boston Red, and probably also on All About Sports. A little different take, maybe take a day or so to, as they say, get it presented or in shape to present. Have a good week, everyone. We'll talk to you next week on the Monday Morning Quarterback from WBRN Radio and the Boston Red Network. We're on the 16th of July, 2018 here. And as we normally do, we remember our former partner, Mr. Jerry Pippin, who died in 2015. Good day.
Donna, this had to be a personal experience reading this indictment. What went through your mind as you read the details, exhaustive details?
First of all, it is finally acknowledged that the hacking was a crime. That's number one. Number two, at the time of the hacking, no one believed us, and we didn't have anyone to come to our defense. President Trump this morning said that the Democratic Party should be ashamed of itself. Well, my response to the president is that there was no way we could go to Staples or Best Buy or Office Depot or Office Max to buy anti-GRU military intelligence software to protect and defend ourselves when the country was under attack, the DNC was under attack, the DCCC in the Clinton campaign. So here's what I like to say to the president. Confront Mr. Putin, give him this document, let him know that the United States will not tolerate another hacking of our elections, 2018, 2020. Like President Obama, also, make sure that the federal agencies are prepared this election cycle. All of our election integrity system must be up to date. And I think the most important thing, now that we know that there are several witches, not some 400-pound guy sitting on the bed, the president needs to acknowledge this and recognize that he has to protect and defend our democracy. The Russians took our emails, took our data, and they could still use that information to try to sow discord and to damage our democratic institutions.
We confront foreign interference in American elections. It's important for us to avoid thinking politically as Republicans or Democrats. We confront foreign interference in American elections. It's important for us to avoid thinking politically as Republicans or Democrats, and instead to think patriotically as Americans. Our response must not depend. We confront foreign interference in American elections.
Democratic strategist Donna Brazile. She served as the DNC chair in 2016 after the hack and leaking of emails from the Democratic National Committee. Chris Christie, former New Jersey governor and ABC News contributor, he led President Trump's transition team in the final months of the campaign. Steve Inskeep, host of NPR's Morning Edition, and Elizabeth Buemiller, Washington bureau chief of the New York Times. So, Donna, this had to be a personal experience reading this indictment. What went through your mind as you read the details, exhaustive details?
First of all, it is finally acknowledged that the hacking was a crime. That's number one. Number two, at the time of the hacking, no one believed us, and we didn't have anyone to come to our defense. President Trump this morning said that the Democratic Party should be ashamed of itself. Well, my response to the president is that there was no way we could go to Staples or Best Buy or Office Depot or Office Max to buy anti-GRU military intelligence software to protect and defend ourselves when the country was under attack, the DNC was under attack, the DCCC in the Clinton campaign. So here's what I like to say to the president. Confront Mr. Putin, give him this document, let him know that the United States will not tolerate another hacking of our elections, 2018, 2020. Like President Obama, also make sure that the federal agencies are prepared this election cycle. All of our election integrity system must be up to date. And I think the most important thing, now that we know that there are several witches, not some 400-pound guy sitting on the bed, the president needs to acknowledge this and recognize that he has to protect and defend our democracy. The Russians took our emails, took our data, and they could still use that information to try to sow discord and to damage our democratic institutions.
And Governor Christie, if you look, one of the most remarkable things in this indictment is it says that the Russians took actions to target Hillary Clinton's personal email server on or about July 27th, 2016. This is what the president had to say on that day.
I will tell you this. Russia, if you're listening, I hope you're able to find the 30,000 emails that are missing. I think you will probably be rewarded mightily by our press.
What the president said,
I remember.
He said clearly.
I remember. Listen,
he directly asked Russia to get the emails, and
John,
they acted.
John, let's not demean what is an extraordinary bit of work here by Mueller and his people and the Department of Justice by trying to connect those two. What also, if you read the whole indictment, it says is that all these attempts started in March and April before that. So the aluminum foil hat folks who want to say, oh, well, Trump said this on the 27th, and they've been working to get
you don't
at
find
every...
that to be an extraordinary
I do think that every once in a while, John, there are coincidences in life, and the idea that they could start an operation based upon what they heard in the morning from the president or in the evening from the presidential candidate Donald Trump is just ridiculous when you read this entire indictment. This was a absolute plan to go after Hillary Clinton, the DNC, and the other Democratic campaign committees. And so the idea that somehow they were spurred on by what Donald Trump said, I think, is absolutely ridiculous. The idea that they had here from the beginning and is laid out in that indictment very clearly, and I was saying this earlier, it's a talking indictment. It allowed us to really see a lot of the evidence, a lot more than you normally put in an indictment, is that these Russian military actors had every intention of trying to damage this election process and to hurt Hillary Clinton. That's what they were trying to do. They didn't need Donald Trump's suggestion to do it. They were doing it months before that comment.
And this is a solid case. Listen, I mean, this is not a product of a witch hunt. This is...
No, and let's make this distinction, too. I think the president's reference to witch hunt has always been about collusion. And that's why I've always read his statements, is that the allegation of collusion between the Trump campaign and the Russians is a witch hunt. And I think that you get some support for that in this indictment when the Deputy Attorney General says there's no evidence of Americans knowingly speaking to Russian military actors who were putting this on. And I think the thing that people haven't said before, I think is important to be said for the American people who are listening out there, this isn't just the Department of Justice or Bob Mueller. This is a group of ordinary Americans who sit in a grand jury in the District of Columbia who heard this and have said there is probable cause to believe that this crime was committed beyond a reasonable doubt. That's powerful for the American people who are listening out there. This isn't a group of lawyers sitting around. This is a group of regular citizens serving as grand jurors in the District of Columbia who have said this evidence deserves their vote, and they gave it to them.
Steve?
The president has not said anything that you just said, Governor, as strongly as you did. You just very strongly said this indictment shows an attack on the United States. That's not the president's message today. The president's message today is that the Democrats are to blame. He hasn't spoken up for the country in any statement that we have yet seen. This is an indictment that shows a series of actions that not only targeted certain people in the United States, but clearly affected the election campaign. We can't say it affected anybody's vote. We don't know that anybody voted differently, but we do know that these hacked emails were a huge part of the news of the campaign at various points over a period of months.
And by the way, the intelligence agencies in January of 2017 found that the goal of the Russians was to help Donald Trump as well as to hurt Hillary Clinton. So the idea that somehow, and I agree with you, the White House statement that came out after the indictment was mostly about there were no Americans involved. There wasn't a word, and the president has not said a word about the fact that this was an attack on our electoral system and that could happen again in 2018.
But let me ask you, this indictment makes it clear this was a Russian military intelligence operation to hack these emails. And as you said, it dominated the news for a good part of the campaign. Does the news media writ large bear some of the responsibility?
Yes.
We, all of us.
You bet.
Yes.
Over day after day,
Yes.
reported the substance and details of these emails that were stolen by the Russians.
Blew it out of proportion. 184 times. What WikiLeaks did once they received the information is they used it strategically each day to shape the political narrative. And the media played it up. It was the only story. It was very difficult to break through the media once that became the story of the day. It was a very highly sophisticated cyber operations that had to involve someone who understood how to shape this narrative.
That is certainly true, but what would you have had the media do? Just say, we're not going to touch this?
You should have said this information is from stolen, hacked emails. And the lives that you put at risk when this happened, the lives you put at risk when you use this information and weaponize it, it went right to the heart of what Mr. Putin was trying to do in our election.
John, let's be candid. I was working on the other side from Don at that time. But the point is that we live in a media culture today that only cares about getting whatever is new first. And the idea of what damage that may cause or not cause becomes a secondary or even tertiary concern. And you know, Don is right. People were put at risk here in a way, because of the way this was played, that was irresponsible. There should have been a lot more work done on this before it was
Well, the RNC was pushing this stuff out pretty well.
I want to agree with one word that Donna Brazile used. You talked about narrative. If embarrassing information is out there about you, and there was embarrassing information about you, we got to report it. We can't pretend it's not there.
But you got half the information because you had hacked, stolen emails. You had half of my files. You didn't have my whole files. What Putin wanted to do, and it wasn't personal. Look, I understood it wasn't personal, so I didn't take it personally. That's why I kept doing my job. And my job every day was to try to focus on the election. But what your job was to say that these are hacked, stolen emails, and they came from a corrupted source. You knew enough to say that, but you didn't do that.
Well, there's where I would agree with you. Is that the media should be careful about the narrative that they sketch and what is the story that's being told.
It was giving complete credibility.
I would defend my news organization.
It was giving complete credibility.
And I would also say that the reason we know much about this is because of what we wrote, the story called The Perfect Weapon, where we went through this. Eric Lipton, David Sanger, Scott Shane.
I agree. Yes.
The reason you know much about this, and we knew about it so early, was because of the reporting we did afterward and went through the entire narrative, step by step.
And we worked with your reporters, and I appreciate the work that you guys did.
But remember one other thing, though, here, is that was all after the fact. But at the time you were playing this, the media was playing this at the time as if this was credible sourcing. And what Donna said is absolutely right. You had to know they didn't have all of her emails. They just took the most embarrassing ones. And you can't assess the credibility of somebody with just part of a story, but the media banged her and a lot of other people in the Clinton campaign unfairly.
I think that bombshell indictment from the special counsel, Robert Mueller.